Have you ever wondered how far someone would go to save a life that everyone insists on condemning? Mary always believed that every person, no matter how dirty their record, deserved a voice, a chance to tell their own story. In the cold corridors of the public defender's office, she was seen as stubborn, too idealistic, even naive. But those who really knew Mary knew. Those who were born ignored by the world learned early on to listen to the silence of those who no one wants to hear. Across town, Robert was the opposite of everything Mary stood for. Money, power, arrogance. The heir to one of the largest corporations in the country, owner of an armored mansion, accused of ordering the murder of his own partner to avoid losing the throne. In the headlines, he was the monster of the moment. To the masses, he was nothing more than a cold-blooded killer who deserved to rot in jail, without forgiveness, without defense. But when Mary looked into his eyes for the first time, something broke. Inside her, it wasn't pity. It was intuition, that inner voice that warns there is more truth here than the whole world is capable of seeing. While the media screamed guilt, Mary decided to listen to Robert's silence. And in that silence, she began to hear everything he didn't have the courage to say out loud. Inside the cell, each encounter was a game of strength. Robert feigned contempt, sarcasm, and mockery. Mary returned the gesture with a firm gaze, paper and pen in hand, writing down every detail, every contradiction that no one else had bothered to look for. And there, in that cell where everyone only saw dirt and lies, Mary began to put together pieces that didn't fit the official story. Outside, the voices grew louder. Lawyer for a rich criminal, traitor to justice, ambitious. The pressure was a weight on her shoulders, but it was also proof that she was going where no one else had the courage to go. While everyone else screamed guilt, Mary listened to the one voice that had yet to be heard, his. And that's how, little by little, the lawyer from the favela and the most hated defendant in the city became accomplices in a secret that could free him or destroy them both forever. This story is proof that not every guilty person is so guilty, and not every innocent person has the face of an angel. Like now, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned. The most uncomfortable truths will find you yet. Mary learned early on that the world doesn't listen to those who are born on the wrong side of town. She grew up watching her mother wake up before the sun to clean houses that would never be hers. And it was there, scrubbing floors alongside her mother, that Mary decided she didn't want to be invisible. She wanted to be heard. She wanted to speak for those who never had a voice. With borrowed books, used notebooks, and a scholarship that seemed like a miracle, she entered law school as if trespassing on forbidden territory. Classmates looked her up and down. Professors were suspicious of her every answer, but Mary collected sleepless nights and impeccable grades. When she graduated, she turned down invitations from fancy offices. She chose the public defender's office. She preferred to stay where the air conditioning almost never works, where the pile of cases never decreases, where each client arrives carrying fear and shame. There, Mary was the arm, the voice, and the courage of those who the city prefers to ignore. Meanwhile, on the other side of the wall, that separates the untouchables from the forgotten, Robert lived a life that many envied, but few could bear. The only child of a family that turned everything into money, he learned to lead million-dollar meetings before he learned to apologize. He had the coldness that the negotiating table demanded, the poise that the press loved to show, and the loneliness that no one imagined existed behind the closed doors of a glass mansion. When the police knocked on his door, they did not find a violent monster, but a man sitting on the edge of the pool, staring into the water as if he wanted to sink along with the secrets that insisted on pulling him under. The news spread like wildfire. Robert, the perfect heir, was accused of ordering the murder of his own partner, the same man who, they say, threatened to expose the family company's dirty dealings. On TV, presenters smiled as they narrated every sordid detail. On social media, everyone became judge and executioner. But no one wanted to ask what was behind those gray eyes that seemed to be made of stone. No one, until Mary sat in front of him, pulled up an iron chair and asked, in the calm voice of someone who does not accept lies, "Robert, tell me your truth." "I can bear to hear it." He laughed. A short, bitter laugh, like someone who finds the effort of someone who is not part of his world funny. For Robert, lawyers were pawns that could be bought, extras in a play that always ends in the same act, a purchased acquittal or a prearranged conviction. But Mary didn't blink. She didn't look away. She didn't offer any deals. She didn't promise miracles. She just promised to listen. And, at first, that was all she got from him: silence, bored looks, loose phrases like traps to see if she would stumble. But Mary, unlike the others, knew the art of listening to what no one else said. Every time she returned home, Mary relived every spoken word, every restrained expression, every lie told with the same conviction as a breather. In her old notebook, she wrote down details that no one else paid attention to: the way he clenched his fists when he talked about his sister, the way he changed the subject when his father's name came up. To everyone else, Robert was just an arrogant killer playing victim. To Mary, he was a puzzle full of pieces that didn't fit, and she had to figure out where the missing piece was to prove that he wasn't who they said he was. In the old building of the public defender's office, Mary's colleagues whispered as she passed. Some thought she was falling for his charm, others bet she was being paid off. But Mary, accustomed to bearing the weight of other people's gazes, quickened her pace, raised her head and delved even deeper into the confusion that Robert seemed to be deliberately hiding. She knew that if she stopped now, she would throw away everything she believed in. Every client of hers deserved the truth, even if it was ugly, even if no one wanted to hear it. And Robert, behind his mask of arrogance, seemed to be silently begging for someone to hear what he could not say out loud. If someone had said, years ago, that the maid's daughter would sit face to face with one of the most powerful men in the country to defend him against the dirtiest crime of all, Mary would have laughed out loud. But there she was, wrinkled shirt, dark circles under her eyes, notebook full of notes that no one understood. And there he was, impeccable suit, unshaven, eyes that screamed everything his mouth denied. Two parallel lives, forced to cross paths where justice usually dies suffocated by lies. For Mary, every minute in there was a battle, against his distrust, against the hungry eyes of the press, against the weight of an entire city that wanted to see blood. And for Robert, every answer that escaped was a crack in the stone wall he had built his entire life to protect himself from those who wanted to see his empire in ruins. This story is not made of perfect heroes or absolute villains. It is made of silences that scream louder than accusations, of truths buried under millions of dollars, and of a woman stubborn enough to dig until she finds what no one wants to see. And if you have felt something up to this point, if this story makes sense to your heart, then make this video reach those who also need to hear that justice is only fair when they have the courage to listen. Like now, share and subscribe, because the most dangerous part of this story is yet to be told. On that stuffy afternoon, Mary walked through the damp corridor of the police station as if she already knew every musty smell, every creaking door that frightens those who are not used to hearing the heavy silence of the cells. When the guard turned the key, she took a deep breath, adjusted her worn jacket on her shoulder and went inside. Robert was sitting, hands resting on his knees, with the expression of someone who has already memorized the routine of endless interrogations. As soon as he saw Mary, he raised an eyebrow and let out a crooked, almost lazy smile, as if her visit was just another waste of time in his life. "The new intern sent to pretend to defend me?" he said, his voice low, full of sarcasm, as if he was sure he was in charge of the game. Mary placed the folder on the metal desk, opened it slowly, ignoring his mocking tone. Her eyes were not seeking approval, nor permission to exist in that cold cubicle. Mary stared at Robert as if she were looking for something beyond the handsome face that graced the covers of gossip magazines. 1 second, 2 seconds, he held her gaze, but a muscle in his jaw twitched. A small detail, almost invisible. To Mary, it was like a choked scream. "I'm the only person in this town who isn't afraid of your last name," she said, in a firm tone that made his smile falter. "And the only one who won't swallow a lie for nothing." Robert laughed. Not a laugh of someone who finds something funny, but a breath of disbelief, as if testing her courage. He pulled the chain on his wrist, leaned forward, and invaded her space with a low voice, almost a whisper. "Do you really want to know who I am, Mary from the public defender's office? Then sit down and listen, because until now no one has really wanted to listen." She didn't back down. She pulled up a chair and sat down in front of him. She placed her hands on the file, but didn't open it. The silence between them was piercing, heavier than the bars around them. Robert blurted out random sentences, dates, numbers, names, everything any lawyer had ever heard. But Mary didn't write it all down. She waited for the pauses, the sighs, the way his eyes would look away when he spoke of a certain business dinner that, according to the official version, should never have ended in tragedy. In the middle of a rehearsed sentence, Robert lost his way. "A slip," he said, "we instead of I." Mary didn't let it go. She repeated aloud, "Us." His gaze hardened again, but the chink in his armor was open. He swallowed hard, slammed his fist on the table, but didn't deny it. To anyone else, it would have been just a silly mistake, a nervousness of someone trying to appear cool. To Mary, it was the first crack in the wall of secrets he guarded tooth and nail. After that day, Mary left her cell with a heavy chest and a racing heart. She knew she was no longer just another case on her crowded desk. Robert was a minefield. Every word, every calculated gesture, every prolonged silence hid more than the police ever wanted to investigate. Mary stood on the sidewalk outside the police station, feeling the sun burn her face as she closed her eyes. In her mind, the word "we" throbbed like a war drum. She walked back to the public defender's office with quick steps, ignoring the curious glances of those who would rather she quit. But Mary's mind was no longer in the routine. On paper, Robert was the most dangerous client of her short career, the man who could drag her name down the drain if anything went wrong. But to her heart, he was an enigma begging to be solved. In the dead of night, when the city slept, Mary relived the interrogation in her mind. She replayed his intonation, the way he avoided certain questions, the tension that arose when the subject came up in the family. There was something there, something that no one saw because it was easier to keep the defendant on the pedestal of a villain. For Mary, it wasn't a question of sympathy or pity, it was a question of justice. Anyone who has lived their entire lives being doubted knows that every accusation needs evidence that stands up to the truth. And in that cell, on that cold table, Mary saw a man who was neither a saint nor a complete monster. She saw someone who held a secret bigger than the crime he had supposedly confessed to. She didn't know everything yet, but she was certain of one thing: the truth lived in Robert's eyes, smothered behind every arrogant smile he flashed. And it was that smile, crooked and malicious, that now began to lose strength every time she returned to that cell. His power game was shattered with each visit, with each question from Mary that came bluntly, without fear of the heavy silence that followed. Robert, the man that an entire city wanted to crucify, was beginning to surrender to something he had never bought, someone willing to listen until the end. And there, in that tight space where truths and lies fought to survive, Mary felt that she was getting too close to what could change everything. And maybe, just maybe, even change herself too. It didn't take long for the corridors of the public defender's office to become a trail of whispers behind Mary. Her every step was followed by glances that pretended to look away as soon as she turned her head. The people who praised her for defending the wrong now judged her for being on the wrong side of the law. All you had to do was open a news website to read the headlines, showing her face next to Robert, the rich devil's advocate, Mary, heroine or accomplice. How much is it worth to defend a millionaire murderer? These were questions that no one asked out of curiosity for justice. They were spears, sharpened to open holes in her reputation, holes that would never close again. Inside the public defender's office, the pressure was quieter, but no less cutting. The chief called her in for conversations that didn't fit into official minutes. Always at the same table, the same restrained smile that seemed more like a warning: "Mary, drop this before it ends you." But Mary, with her hands folded in her lap, listened, nodded, and left the room even more determined not to drop anything. Because every time she entered that cell and looked Robert straight in the eye, something inside her screamed that this wasn't just a story of murder and dirty inheritance. It was fear, a fear that he tried to bury under sarcasm. And Mary, who had lived half her life swallowing fear, knew how to recognize it when it appeared in others. Each report she gave grew thicker, each prison visit longer. Robert spoke little, but the way he looked at Mary changed without his realizing it. The arrogant tone was still there, but along with an uncomfortable, almost forbidden confidence. She asked questions no one else dared to ask. He answered with pauses that said more than any rehearsed words. In the midst of this silent duel, something began to grow, as dangerous as the confession she wanted to extract from him. In the early hours of the morning when Mary reviewed the interrogation recordings, his voice seemed closer than it should have been. It was as if Robert were there, on the torn cloth couch, whispering each sentence in her ear. Her chest tightened with anger because she knew how wrong this was, but her heart didn't ask permission to feel anything. And when her cell phone vibrated with notifications of new headlines, she took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and told herself that he was just a client, that work came first, that no one would make her stray from the purpose that brought her here. But the truth was that with each visit, Mary grew less afraid of what the world was saying about her, and more afraid of what her own heart was beginning to say, quietly, while her mind screamed that it was insanity. It was insane to trust Robert. It was even more insane to see tenderness in a man everyone called a monster. And yet, in the tightness of that cold cell, in the seconds when their eyes locked, the rest of the world seemed to go silent. The meetings with her boss became more intense. Do you want to throw your career in the trash because of this case, Mary? Do you want to be remembered as the woman who gave voice to a murderer? She held back her anger, answered politely, but inside she screamed that no one knew what she knew. Only she had seen Robert lower his head, bite his lip to hold back tears when he spoke of his sister, of the mother he pretended not to have. Only she had the courage to ask him why he had admitted everything so quickly, why lying so well required so much effort from someone who could simply afford the best lawyer in the country. In the midst of all this storm, Mary found herself doing something she had never done for any client, praying for him. She closed her eyes and silently prayed for Robert to have the strength to tell her everything. She prayed for strength for herself, not to confuse empathy with pity, or pity with something even more dangerous, wanting to protect him from a world that wanted to eat him alive. Meanwhile, outside, the media was feeding on every detail. They photographed Mary leaving prison late. They created theories about a forbidden romance, about secret meetings. Some colleagues who had previously invited her to lunch began to avoid her at the cafe. And yet, Mary kept the folder of documents under her arm as a shield. On each page, evidence that was still not enough to turn the tide, but that, taken together, told a story that no one wanted to hear anymore. Robert could tell. Every time Mary returned to that cell, he no longer saw just an insistent lawyer. He saw the only person who dared to believe that he was not a monster. And that look of hers, clear, hard, firm, began to rob him of his best-built defenses. Robert, accustomed to buying everything, began to understand that he could not buy what he needed most, the forgiveness of someone who had the courage to look inside him without trembling. Mary wrote everything down, recorded every tremor in his voice, every contradiction in the official statement. And even though she told herself it was just work, she felt her body react when his hand lightly touched hers to hold a pen or a piece of paper that had fallen. Small shocks that made Mary lose, for a few seconds, the thread of reason she swore she would never let go of. And yet, every touch, every look, every held-back sigh only made one certainty grow. Robert was keeping a secret that could blow up everything, including what was left of her. And Mary, no matter how much she tried to protect herself, was already tied to that secret more than she could admit. With each visit, Mary felt the wall Robert had built for years begin to crack from within. It wasn't a confession thrown on the table in a dramatic way, it was a piecemeal outburst, a truth he let slip in loose sentences, with his red eyes when he spoke of it. Family. Mary connected it all when, one suffocating afternoon, he lost control. His voice broke when he mentioned his sister's name. It was then that Mary knew, with the certainty that only those who live by sniffing out lies can understand, Robert didn't kill anyone. He carried the crime on his shoulders to protect what he still called my last piece of innocence. His sister, trapped in a rotten marriage, eaten up by gambling debts from her violent ex-husband, was the weak point that no one knew how to use against the great heir, until now. At that moment, everything made sense like a cruel puzzle. The dead partner, the tampered contract, the fortune at risk, the whispered blackmail in the early hours of the morning, and Robert saying yes to a guilt that wasn't his to keep his sister alive and away from the tabloids. Mary felt her chest tighten. Years of studying law, believing that justice was done on stamped paper, and now here she was, faced with living proof that sometimes a man becomes a monster to protect the one he loves. But the price was too high. Every minute behind bars drained from Robert the little humanity he still had. The expensive suit no longer made a difference. His impeccable hair became unkempt, his confident smile turned to tiredness. And it was Mary who saw the slow collapse up close. She, the same girl who grew up swallowing humiliation, now held in his eyes a strength that no one else could offer. And perhaps that was what kept her awake at dawn, gritting her teeth, repeating to herself that she was still a lawyer and that her heart could want nothing more than the truth. But the heart does not accept orders when it has already decided to surrender. Between one report and another, Mary would pick up her cell phone, look at the photo of his case file, and reread every note she had made hidden from her bosses. And deep down, she knew that it was not enough to free him from the concrete cell. She wanted to tear him out of the invisible cell, where he had been locked up since he was a child, the cell where love was weakness, trust was currency, and forgiveness was a forbidden word. One rainy afternoon, Mary arrived for another interrogation. Robert was different. His shoulders slumped, his beard unshaven, his eyes sunken, but there was something new, the decision not to run away from her anymore. When she pulled out his chair, he didn't joke, didn't tease. He just took a deep breath, rested his elbows on the cold table and spoke. Softly, "I told you because I knew only you would hear it through. But now, Mary, don't let this get out of here. Protect her, not me." Mary felt his hand touch hers. It was quick, a brush of fingers that felt like a cry for help. In that second, lawyer and client ceased to exist. There were two tired hearts left, stripped of title, of surname, of fear of scandal. Mary saw in that touch the summary of everything he could not say out loud. "I need you, even if you don't deserve it." She swallowed, the guilt burning her throat. She knew that keeping that secret meant being an accomplice to a deadly lie. But turning in his sister meant killing Robert inside. And anyone who has ever seen someone die slowly understands that sometimes the justice written in books doesn't fit in real life. Outside, the newspapers chewed over every rumor with a thirst for destruction. Mary became the scandalous lawyer of the year. Theories of a forbidden romance went viral in WhatsApp groups. People who had never exchanged a word with her commented on news portals. "It's obvious, she's sold out, she must be in love, protecting the criminal to get ahead in life." But no one knew of the silent struggle that was taking place in that living room. No one heard the stifled confessions, the remorse that trembled in Robert's voice, the brotherly love that transformed a man of stone into a desperate protector. And Mary, who had always been stubborn, was now even more so. Every lie she read in the newspapers pushed her even deeper into the mission of saving not only an innocent man, but a heart that had forgotten how to trust. Between scribbled pages, hidden recordings, and torn reports, Mary plotted a way out in her mind. But each plan had too high a price. Either she would destroy his family to save him, or she would watch him rot for a crime he never committed. And while the city slept dreaming of bloody headlines, Mary did not sleep. She spent the nights drawing futures, testing paths, praying for the courage to hold his hand until the end, even knowing that, in the end, there might be no forgiveness for either of them. This part is the heart of our story. Comment below what you would do in Mary's place. Would you deliver the truth at any cost, or would you protect the ones you love even if the world didn't forgive you? Your opinion makes this story beat even stronger, and who knows, in the next episode, your comment might be read here. Right, because I'll listen to you like Mary listened to Robert. No one in the public defender's office understood when Mary stopped asking permission to enter that cell and began to dive headfirst into the investigation on her own. Documents that no one would read, unauthorized phone calls recorded, planted evidence that she dug up page by page while her eyes burned with sleep. She knew that the price of defying headline-hungry prosecutors was high, but with each sleepless night, the certainty only grew. Either she would bring true justice, or it would be just another piece of dirty theater that always ends with the same hypocritical applause. In the week leading up to the trial, Mary carried her bag heavy with hidden files, handwritten scribbles, hastily taken photos of tampered contracts. Every detail no one wanted to see was there, stitched together by sleepless nights and stubborn faith. On her last visit to the prison, before the verdict, Robert didn't say a word. He just looked at her, took a deep breath, and let the silence say what no words could. "You're the only thing that's right about all this." When Mary entered the courtroom, everyone turned to see the lawyer of the wealthy murderer. Whispers cut through the air like razors. At the prosecution table, prosecutors glowed with confidence. They had the media in their pockets, public opinion in their hands, but they didn't have what Mary had sewn into her chest, the courage to destroy her own life to save his. With a firm voice, she presented evidence. that no one imagined existed, statements from hidden accounts, email exchanges in which the real killer negotiated silence, recordings of the blackmail made to Robert's sister. Each torn sheet she placed on the table was a stab in the pride of the prosecution. Each word she said was a sentence against herself, because exposing this meant revealing confidential sources, illegal methods of obtaining evidence, everything that could be used to silence her career once and for all. Robert couldn't take his eyes off her from the dock. The stone man who had once smiled teasingly from the corner of his mouth now held her bound hands, squeezing her wrists until they hurt, choking back the tears that threatened to drown out years of pride. He knew that Mary wasn't just breaking the accusation, she was burning her own future to free him. The judge, pressured by the revelations, suspended the case for hours. Journalists crowded the hallway, microphones fought for a scoop, cameras shook. During live broadcasts, Mary left the courtroom carrying on her shoulders the weight of being called a criminal, a traitor, and crazy. But each step she took echoed a silent message. Justice is not done with applause, it is done with courage. When the judge returned, he read the sentence in a neutral, almost cold voice, perhaps to contain the shame of having kept up a farce for so long. Robert, acquitted for lack of evidence, was free to walk out the front door. A clean man on paper, but scarred on the inside. Mary didn't hear the rest. The sound of the flashbulbs drowned out any pent-up applause. Prosecutors huffed and puffed, fellow robed men looked away, pretending to shuffle papers that no longer mattered. Outside, the crowd pressed around the courthouse steps. Live headlines flashed on cell phone screens: defense scandal, lawyer delivers clandestine evidence, Robert Williams innocent, miracle or manipulation? The door opened. Robert came out first, thinner, more human, quieter. There was no smile of victory on his face, only weariness and a longing for who he had been before everything went wrong. Behind him, Mary paused for a second in the shadow of the doorway. She knew that from now on, there would be no boardrooms, no promotions, no pats on the back from hypocritical colleagues. There was only what was left of her, a lawyer without a badge, but with a clear conscience like never before. Amidst hysterical reporters, sharp questions, microphones almost touching his face, Robert did what no one expected. He turned his body around and extended his hand toward her. A simple gesture, but it spoke volumes that words could never convey. Mary looked at him, then at the cameras, then inside herself. Every step she took toward that hand was a step away from anything they had ever called success. When his fingers wrapped around hers, the scandal turned to dust. In that touch, there was no contract, there was no guilt, there was no certain future. There were just two hearts stripped of masks, willing to walk together away from everything that once held them back. And that was how, without saying a single word, Mary gave up everything that her society called a stable life, to live something that no one could buy, the truth that only those who have the courage to lose everything can hold on to. As the flashbulbs continued to pop, Robert squeezed her hand as if holding a precious secret. And Mary, deep down, knew that this story still had a lot to explode, because freedom is a high price to pay, especially when you choose to pay it with your heart. When everyone turned their faces away, Mary opened her eyes. While the entire city was fed by the scandal, by the trial broadcast on bar screens, by the headlines that turned pain into a spectacle, she chose to do what she had always promised herself as a girl, to listen to those who no one wanted to listen to. The moment she held Robert's hand as they left the courthouse, the crowd divided. Some spat insults, some turned their faces away, some clutched their cell phones tighter to film the moment when the murderer's lawyer showed herself to be more human than any sentence could explain. For Mary, this was not an act of heroism. It was not a scene from a cheap movie, nor a confession of love from a fairy tale. It was the result of sleepless nights, of a faith that only grows when everything around tells you to give up. It was the confirmation that love, when it is true love, does not ask for permission from any reputation. It does not bow to a salary, a diploma, or a wall of prejudice. Love happens, and when it does, no stone is left standing of what pride has built. Her footsteps beside Robert echoed on the courthouse steps like a warning. Those who carry truth in their soul do not need to shout to be heard. He squeezed her hand as if holding on to what is left of themselves after being ground down by blackmail, headlines, and lies. Mary felt his skin warm, felt the tremor of his fingers that had previously seemed as cold as marble. And it was there, amidst camera flashes and questions she did not answer, that a new sentence was formed, a sentence that no judge would ever hear. There was a man who never knew how to love and a woman who never stopped believing that love is the only argument that wins any court. With every meter she walked on that sidewalk, Mary saw her old world crumble. She knew she had lost her job, her badge, her status as an exemplary defender. She knew that doors would close, that people who once pretended to be friends would turn their faces away in the hallways of government offices. But those who have been invisible once in their lives are not afraid to be invisible again. For those born under humiliation, being expelled from a position is not the end, it is just another page turned. What no one can take away from her is the courage to have seen what no one wanted to see, Robert's fear, the guilt he carried, the innocence that still throbbed behind eyes that everyone called cruel. For him, every breath he took with her was a miracle. Robert, who had always controlled everything with a pen or a safe full of zeros, was now naked of power. He had only her hand, her gaze, her faith, and, deep down, that was all he had ever needed. For the first time, he didn't need to pretend he wasn't afraid. He didn't need to buy silence. He didn't need to memorize phrases to manipulate any audience. With Mary, he could just be. Robert, not the heir to a fortune stained with secrets, not the defendant for a crime he didn't commit, but the man who understood too late that love is the only wealth that isn't hidden in a bank account. Meanwhile, those watching from afar typed hasty comments, spread theories, and swore that it was just another act. But those who look from the outside always think they know everything. Only those who carry the truth in their hearts understand the price of being misunderstood to save someone that no one wanted to save. And Mary paid this price smiling inside, because she knew that no freedom is worth anything if the heart remains chained. Months have passed since the day Mary and Robert walked through that crowd of hungry eyes, holding hands as a shield against a world that only knew how to point fingers. He could have disappeared, started a new life in another country, hidden behind lawyers who would erase any stain from the past. But those who know the freedom of being truly seen are never content to live in the shadows. Robert chose to stay. He chose to rebuild everything, brick by brick, but without the glass walls that kept him prisoner to his own surname. He gave up his positions, his meetings where lies were exchanged like currency, and invested in something that no amount of money can buy, an honest new beginning. With Mary by his side, each signed paper bore the mark of someone who once paid the highest price for the lies of others. Mary, in turn, found closed doors, but she also discovered windows opened by those who always believed in her. Simple people who saw in her a defender of difficult truths. She set up a small office in the neighborhood where she was born. No red carpet at the entrance, no fancy reception, but a sign that reads, "Here, everyone has the right to be heard," and every customer who walks through that door knows that, inside, there is no invisible judge, just courage and listening. And between lawsuits, hearings, and tight hugs, Mary and Robert discovered that love doesn't require a perfect setting. They built a house away from the cameras, without spotlights, but full of fresh coffee and comfortable silences. He still carries ghosts, she still collects judgmental looks, but together they understood the one lesson that no one teaches in college or in court: when you choose to truly love, you lose a lot, reputation, status, even friends. But you gain everything that matters, someone who stays, even when the rest of the world leaves. Today, when Mary closes her eyes to sleep, she is no longer afraid of what people say about her. And Robert, when he wakes up, finds on the other side of the pillow the reason that makes any scandal of the past turn to dust. They are not perfect. They are real. And they have proven, firsthand, that justice can fail, but love, when it is true, never fails. And for those who stayed here, take this with you for life. Those who choose to see their heart before the headline, those who have the courage to lose everything to save someone, discover that the greatest victory is not written in a sentence, it is built in the silence of those who love without needing to be applauded. Share this story with those who believe in the power of starting over, and stay here with me. Because as long as there are loves like this, I will be here to tell you every detail that makes our hearts beat faster. Stories like this remind us that the truth lives in the details, in the silence, in the touch of those who stay even when everything seems lost. And the next video already has another story made for those who truly feel, for those who believe that life, deep down, always holds a surprise for those who do not give up on hearing what no one wants to say out loud. Until the next story.